Hey, I'm happy to be here today, hosting this BigONE panel session with Professor Lisa Short and David Pedrini at FlashLoans on the subject of usability and how we can create services that people feel comfortable with. So, and just a quick note, thanks to John McLeod, crypto PR expert himself, for making this happen. So it's a big subject, Lisa. So where would you start on this? Why is it an important subject? I guess surely crypto's there. It's up to people to figure it out for themselves, or is that being a little bit simplistic? Why is it an important subject?
Yeah, I think it's simplistic, and well, we see it as simplistic. So if you ask somebody about, like any of us here, we're the converted. So we're in some ways we're speaking to the converted, but if you go out there and speak to other individuals, it's still a scary subject. And the industry in many ways, and also our decision makers, our leaders, our politicians, the people making the rules and the decisions are responsible for that. So my first step is always education, because until we can actually educate the wider public and those who are not in the room, the people that are not the converts, then we won't get them to reduce the level of fear and misinformation that they have about digital assets and cryptocurrencies. I can give so many examples of, if you say to somebody, here's an opportunity to use, I'll use an example, crypto.com, for example, and it's got a Visa card attached to it. And did you know that just by changing your application that you use, you could actually save enough money to buy an airfare for a holiday each year, just by spending exactly the same, but using a different application. And they'll come back and go, yeah, but that's really volatile. It's really scary, and I don't know how to do it, et cetera, et cetera. And then they go into the diatribe about, KYC and AML and, that it's not regulated, and there's a lot of, cowboys in the industry. And so that level of misinformation still exists. Education has to be key, and it has to be coming from credible experts who can actually articulate the misinformation and say, this is not true. And we also need to call out the decision makers who are ultimately the producers of this. I mean, the politicians and the regulators and the central banks and all of those who've got vested interests in not having the public use this technology and digital assets. There's room to play for both, but education has to be key, and we are nowhere near to the level of education that we should be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I hear what you're saying. Obviously, David, you're at the cutting edge with the FlashLoans application. Why do you think that usability is key? I mean, what's your particular take on this subject?
Yeah, it's a subject close to our hearts, to be honest, because most of the dApps and projects we've worked on are to assist people to use blockchain tech, which is there. We found a lot of people are really clued up on blockchain, and they're looking to incorporate it into their business. But when it comes to actually picking up the tools to do the tasks, there's not much, or I'd say we're much heavier on the back end in the crypto space than we are on the front end at the moment. So a really good example actually is a project we created called multisend.org, which is effectively a dApp to allow people to bulk send tokens. And in our earlier days, kind of 2015, 2016, of just working alongside crypto companies to assist them, we had lots of people doing either a competition or an ICO or a token distribution of any kind. And they'd say to us, we know how to send tokens from one wallet to another, but I've got 1,000 wallet addresses here to send tokens to, how do we do it? And of course, without smart contract programming skills and Solidity understanding, it's very difficult. So we built Multisend as a tool for people to be able to essentially upload a CSV of all the data. The platform will do some checks to see if there's any duplicates or errors, and then you can send, say, 200 addresses in a single transaction on Ethereum. Same with Binance, Tron, Polygon. Just basically making tools that people can pick up and actually start using the blockchain, and trying to remove some of this on-ramp issues that people have in terms of using blockchain. FlashLoans is a whole different beast. So obviously with blockchain, we're seeing products that just weren't physically possible before in the traditional finance world. Which is really exciting. So when me and the team discovered FlashLoans, we were just blown away. Just to give your viewers a quick summary, a flash loan is essentially a 15-second loan. So it's a loan which is borrowed and repaid in a single Ethereum block. And essentially what the technology does is it will lend you $10,000, $100,000, $1 million. There's not a very, very high ceiling on how much you can borrow. And then you could do, for example, an arbitrage trade where you purchase token asset A from one exchange, B from another exchange. And if you can sell the asset and return the funds within the same block, you will actually keep the margin on top of that, and self-liquidation and some other cool features. So yeah, it's just amazing technology. But the headache is, in order to access FlashLoans, you have to be a Solidity programmer. And from our experience, traders and programmers they're two different hats to wear. So we just wanted to bring this functionality to traders, which is what we aim to do through the FlashLoans application. So yeah, what Lisa's saying is spot on.
But if I can pick up on that and just listen to the conversation, everything that you've said would go straight over the heads of the users that we need to bring into this. So even the language around token. I was I led a session for the Albright Foundation in International Women's Week, actually, because they just released their Albright Meta and NFTs. Now, again, NFTs, we can't have a conversation about digital assets at the moment without having a conversation about NFTs. Now, I say straight away, well, that stands for non-fungible token, but actually I don't like the word token because there is no such thing. It's a non-fungible asset. The word token is going to stick, I get that, but it just means a piece of code. People don't actually even understand what that token is. That's a method of payment for the work that's conducted on a blockchain. And you're investing in that. That's what you're investing in. And so you need to understand not just that it's a token and it's listed on an exchange, what does it do? And so that we need to simplify this language, even when we're talking about arbitrage trading and Solidity developers and so forth. Something like FlashLoans, could you imagine in the hands of everyday mum and dad investors, small businesses being able to actually leverage that sort of technology? But they don't get it because we in the industry are in many ways guilty of it ourselves, where we use the language. So we'd love people to use this. It's great. It's fantastic. But they're stuck on the word token and crypto. They're stuck on the words KYC. They don't even know what that means. And so we have to bring this down to a level of conversation that requires access and usability. And access is an identity for starters. And so if we talk about KYC, I remember sitting down, I was stuck in Australia, obviously during the pandemic. And I sat down with a group of friends, a family of mine, whose parents are in their 70s. Their youngest children, the grandchildren were in their 19s, 20s, 21s, 22s, and the parents were, in the 40s to 50s age. And we sat down over Easter and they said, come on, Lisa, you're here. We never get an opportunity for you to be around. We want to buy our first crypto. Right, let's sit down and do it. Now, for starters, I was limited to what I had available in Australia. So I used Wirex actually as the application because I knew it had a Visa card attached to it, but it was available in Australia. Not everything's available in Australia. I sat down with them literally and walked them through step by step of setting up a crypto account and showed them what the KYC, the Know Your Customer, looked like. To the point of having to, do the whole facial thing and upload documents and so forth. But then I went to them and I said, now when I'm finished, and, with Wirex, you have to do a transaction and get the 4 digits off a bank account to link it to your account. But what I actually then said was, now I want you to compare that to what you've experienced with a traditional bank. Can any one of you in this room say you've ever been through that degree of KYC to walk in and open a bank account? You don't. You walk in with a physical copy of your driver's license and your passport. It could just be a photocopy. Hand it over and they say, yeah, that's great. You've got 100 points or whatever. So we need to bring it down to that level of conversation. And something like FlashLoans is extraordinary tech, but it's not getting to the end users. It's getting to traders. It's getting to those who are trading in the space, not using the space. And this is where we are fundamentally flawed and failing in our ability to educate and articulate these conversations. For the first time when I spoke about NFTs to the audience for the Albright Foundation, was flooded afterwards saying, my God, Lisa, it's the first time we've ever understood what it is. Because I straight away said, NFTs are not an asset. They are a technology. What's created from it is that it becomes a digital asset. I explained, in lengthy conversation and simply articulated what it was. But they had no idea that NFTs are a technology. They thought they were a thing. They all thought they were digital art. because that's what's being perpetrated. They didn't understand that they were representations of singularity and uniqueness, and you could actually use an NFT technology to create a representation of your CV, your career, your business plan, lots of other things within business, assets for insurance, and they can use that piece of code can be used to trigger another, be an entry point, the switch that turns on an automatic contract, a smart legal contract. And so we fear this technology because we don't understand it. And FlashLoans, I think, imagine that. I just think that's extraordinary to be in the hands of small businesses who could, for the first time, start to engage in arbitrage transactions. But even the word arbitrage, they wouldn't understand. So we have to bring this down to that level of educational understanding. We need to be starting this in primary schools, but we also need the very large percentage of people who want to use this technology who are resistive to it are these sort of over 40s, 50s, 60s. Very large percentage. We're not even hitting target in that.
I think they did a really good job of visualizing this. And have you seen the comedy series Silicon Valley?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's the scene where Richard Hendricks is basically doing an alpha test with Pied Piper amongst all of his colleagues, friends, and peers. And he gets this feedback to say, this is fantastic. We love it. Really good tech. And you can see him get visibly excited about the positive feedback. He launches it to the public and the feedback is terrible. Nobody knows how to use the thing. They don't understand it. And that's kind of true to what you were saying, Alicia.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at crypto exchanges, I always, if I've got a first-time user, for example, who's being introduced, literally, it's often family and friends, and I've got my 87-year-old dad who's bought his first crypto and he can do it. So I always say, if I can teach an 87-year-old who's got dementia how to use it, then I can teach anyone. But I think that's an important point. Access to any of these and access and to any of the digital systems we have comes around to our front door key, and that's identity. And we don't even have a solid conversation around what identity means. For example, you cannot have a joint crypto account. Why can't you? Because it's connected to me as an individual. That's part of its security mechanism. And so these are conceptual differences that we need people to understand. It's conceptual stuff that they need to understand, etc. And so, I often talk about when I deliver presentations, and I'm asked all the time to deliver presentations things, but I often have a discussion not about the tech, but about the philosophy of blockchain. What does it mean? And if you can understand what it means for you, what fundamental business processes it's changing, then you can actually get them to understand things more. And I also still do talk about the hybrid world, because at the moment and always, we will have to have a fiat on-ramp. Now, can I tell you, most people out there in the mainstream world don't even know what fiat is. And you go, it's cash. It's the cash. It's the money of the country. And whether that fiat is digital, well, it all is digital at the moment anyway, because you physically can't put physical cash on a blockchain. And that's another conversation. People think central bank digital currencies are cryptocurrencies, and they're not. It's a fully digitized version of fiat. But we'll always require that. So when we talk about fiat onboarding and off-ramping, that just means we're exchanging digital assets back to the currency of the country we're in. And that's going to get less and less, I guess, as we move more into digital assets, and we're using that for payment mechanisms. But I think, this I think is profound. One of my close colleagues purports to be an expert, and he is. He's an expert in the technology. And one day I was having this conversation with him when I moved to the UK, the difficulties I all of a sudden faced, because all the applications that I had developed and used for my own personal use in the Australian market were impacted by the FCA's regulatory impact from January last year. And so they're still sitting in this, where we're not fully registered yet because the FCA hasn't gotten through the list, one of which was Wirex. All of a sudden I arrived and I tried to put a fiat onto my Wirex card and couldn't. And I had no idea why. Because mine account is an Australian account. I found out that the FCA has a geo block, not just a company block, a geo block, even on my Australian account. Now, the reason I say that is I was trying to pay some things, and all of a sudden I arrive here in the UK and all my accounts, because I don't have a cent in fiat. Why would I? Because I practice what I preach. And so I'm trying to use my applications and I can't. I had to re-establish new accounts new KYC, new limit restrictions to get to the point I can do transactions. This expert's going, I don't get what's so hard, Lisa. And he was getting quite angsty about why I hadn't been able to pay him some money, because I'm going, I can't get it to you. I physically can't get it to you until I go through these regulatory changes and new account setups. And then I went, have you actually ever made a crypto transaction? And the answer was no. He holds no cryptocurrency. Now, how can you possibly be an expert or purport to be an expert in this industry and understand what people experience and feel and need to know unless you've actually used the product? So to your point, David, back end's doing really well, front end, we're abysmal at.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I know, they introduced Bitcoin in El Salvador's legal tender, and one of the obstacles to adoption, because it hasn't been hugely successful adoption-wise, is because I'm guessing that it's not been super easy to get your head around, whether you're a business or an individual. So I hear what you're saying, Lisa. I think also for a lot of folks, their way into it, that they're pragmatic, they just want to make their lives easier or their children's lives easier, is just giving them a tangible use case to start off with. For example, I could go on about open source software, GNU Linux. If I said to you, see that old laptop in your cupboard that you're not using, I could, upload a little bit of Linux onto it and it will work like, crazy, hardly any effort. Are you interested? Then they can see there's something in it, right? And I think maybe that's, obviously we're talking about the mass population rather than, traders. Maybe that's part of one way into it anyway.
Agreed.
I think there's certain corners of blockchain now which are onboarding people big time, which is nice to see. One of which is definitely gaming. So we've seen lots of cool blockchain projects now which are onboarding, gamers. They're much more kind of tech savvy with their especially PC gaming side, and that's been really interesting. But I think probably one of the most useful topics with blockchain is DeFi, decentralized finance. So I completely agree with you, Lisa. Trying to find new ways to onboard people would be great for that.
Well, even in the DeFi space, it's it's interesting because conceptually, people don't actually understand that when you deposit funds to a traditional bank, those banks are lending your money. They're making money on your money. And at the moment, as we know, the interest rates that we receive in a traditional bank are pretty much non-existent, 0.5% or 1% if you're lucky. And so when you start to talk about decentralized finance, we need to sort of almost eliminate the decentralized bit because it's irrelevant to the end user. It's a new process where instead of it going to a bank, your asset is still sitting in your wallet and you're getting paid interest as well as watching your asset grow or drop as it may be. It fluctuates. So it's a real live price on your asset, but you're still getting an interest rate on that. And yet the value of your cryptocurrency is being utilized by the crypto exchange or application that's using it. Very different to a bank where they take your money and pay you nothing. So you can translate this conceptual change to somebody so that you can have, they talk about, it's high risk and all this stuff, but you know what? Your money, go to Ukraine. Go to anywhere where, Zimbabwe, any of those countries where the value of fiat is worthless, and go and try and pull all your money out of a traditional bank. Guess what? You can't. In fact, what they'll do is they'll block your account. So if you talk about high risk, there's just as high risk in a traditional bank. Some governments do back the reserves, and obviously a certain percentage of liquidity has got to be kept in liquidity. But if every single person went to the Bank of England or every single organisation or Lloyd's Bank or wherever it might be and want to take their money out, guess what? You can't. Because they've got your money loaned out, making money on it. Yeah. And so decentralised finance means we just get rid of that bank, and instead of it going to a bank and through their processes and them making money, this is actually literally going out to everyone who is connected to that blockchain, if you like. That's a decentralised process. So I think DeFi is again a massive opportunity, but the difficulties we have, of course, is it's still very difficult for a business to have a crypto account. So small businesses, if you imagine, if a small business has got £50,000 sitting in their bank account, imagine the difference if that £50,000 could be sitting in a crypto exchange and being used for DeFi, even if it was on USD, even if it was on one of our really stable coins or our ones that there's not a high volatility or fluctuation in change or risk, they'd still be making between 6 to 12%. You know, that's between 5 and 11% higher than what they're getting sitting in the bank. Actually, it's probably less than that because they get charged fees. So, you know, these are the open, transparent conversations that aren't being had. Instead, we keep getting told that no, cryptocurrency is about money laundering, and you know, it was designed for money laundering. I've got news for you: money laundering didn't start with crypto; it started hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And what they don't understand with crypto, even the allegedly almost impossible to track ones like Monero. We can see and track and trace every single transaction on a blockchain.
Exactly.
Every single one.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, David, just want to ask David, because you put some good points about, you know, business, Lisa. From your experience, David, what will it take for, you know, the run-of-the-mill business in the UK, for example, to take advantage of, you know, as Lisa was saying, you know, the higher yields you can get on exchanges for your cash? I mean, what's the kind of the blocker or the obstacle? What do you think needs to happen?
I think it's just seeing a reward level at the moment. I think, yeah, trying to gauge someone's interest on crypto if they don't have an interest on crypto is difficult. Yeah, we're actually working on a product which hopefully will help with this at the moment, called dBooks, which is a crypto accounting solution. And one of the ways we're tackling DeFi is essentially to give people a set of calculators for their business. So we're going to say, for example, how much is your monthly payroll? Let's say it's 50,000 US. Then we'll show them how much crypto you would need to invest into DeFi to be able to achieve 50,000 US, so that you can effectively pay your payroll just with revenue which is achieved from DeFi. And I think if we were to speak to companies with that messaging, as opposed to, do you want to learn about crypto, which you may or may not have an interest in, or would you like to pay your entire staff for free with a new revenue stream? That's a much more kind of engaging and sexier way of understanding DeFi. And then there's kind of a few steps to learn before you can achieve that, which is small workload compared to the outcome. Because I think the same also applies, ironically, for crypto companies as well. So there's lots of crypto companies which raised huge crypto funds in 2017, for example, which was our first ICO boom. Their whole business is crypto. So they're generally sat on large crypto reserves. All of their payroll and everything is crypto. But it's just sat in cold storage, not really working for them. So if we can try and get some of those companies to put that balance to work, then that's really exciting. Yeah, so hopefully that'll make it more interesting. And I think as well, the kind of main topic of this conversation, the front end and the UI could make things much easier. Much easier.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great solution as well. I think what you're saying, Dave, is more about what will it do for me rather than do I need to understand the technology. And you're right, the UX and the design of these needs to be designed with the end user involved, not the technical involved, because we don't need to know the back end. It's like when you know, typically the same thing we talk about when you buy an iPhone. I don't need to know how the iPhone works. I buy it because it's my lifetime experience. It's my life. It's my experience. What can I do with it? I mean, who buys a phone these days because it makes a phone call? It does everything else. And so we haven't thought about the end user experience. And I'm going to throw something into this conversation that's important. We still have a huge gender divide in the use of this technology. 50.3% of the population on this earth are women. And then we've only got 14% of women working in this space, and less than 3% of leaders in this space, particularly in blockchain and crypto, are women. Now that will tell you we've got technologies that are being designed for men by men. Now it's not a sexist conversation, it's a pragmatic one. If you want end users to use the technology, you have to ask the end users, and women are not being asked on what they want to use and need to understand. And it was quite profound to me when I did the presentation for Albright. because they're going, I don't use it because the applications are so complex. If I sent somebody, for example, to hit BTC or one of the complex exchanges, they would be mortified. They would walk away from the industry. And so there needs to be a fundamental shift here. We need to be thinking not just about the known users. We need to be looking about what are the potential users and asking them to be engaged in the development, the end, the UX, the design, the actual use of these applications, what makes it simple, and get rid of the technical language. And also in many ways, we do have to hybridize and bridge the conversation between what they know and where we want them to go. It's a chasm at the minute. And although we see it, those who aren't in the industry don't. So we've got to offer a little bit more of a bridge in the languaging that we use and analogies, if you like, so they can actually understand. And I love that concept of, do you want to pay your payroll? Just by doing something different, this will save you this amount of money and you'll actually have money to pay your payroll. We could be saying the exact same thing for a business, a small business who's trying to engage, because there's an unlevel playing field with corporates, trying to get trade agreements and tender contracts and big contracts with corporates, long payment terms. If you want to get involved in a long payment term, here's where you could have, instead of having to have a mortgage or an overdraft, you could be having your cash reserve sitting in DeFi, and that money that you save would be the cost that you incur in waiting to get paid from a corporate. And so we've got to articulate this in different ways.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I think another way to bridge it, if I may say, Lisa and David, is offering discounts when you're making purchases if you do it in crypto, right? Just for there's some of that going on online right now, but if that took off and you had a 10% or 20% discount, then for a lot of people that would give them the incentive to start to think about, oh, how do I open a wallet? How does it work? And all that sort of thing. So it's those kind of approaches certainly can help, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I actually think Coinbase and Binance to a degree are doing a good job on that front. I've seen that they're doing kind of some educational content, which you learn about a certain cryptocurrency, you have a test at the end, and then if you pass the test, you receive $20 or something in that crypto. And I think that's kind of a novel way to do it, because the only investment is time. There's a financial reward at the end, and then kind of you end up learning about the crypto which you've gone through that process on as the byproduct. So yeah, I think initiatives like that, discounting would be another great one.
Agreed.
So, Lisa, a quick question: what do you think would be a good onboarding, or what do you think would be kind of a good tooling to help remove the problem as well? It's definitely something that would be good to understand.
Yeah, look, one of my passions is that every single one of our applications has a different KYC process. Imagine if it's the same. And I don't mean the same process per se, but using the same identity. So we need to work, and this is not just a crypto challenge, but it certainly is a digital assets and a digital transformation challenge. There needs to be significantly more work done on a self-sovereign digital ID. And so once we've assured a self-sovereign digital ID, literally, I'm just going to say an NFT, you become an NFT, and that NFT should be able to trigger any digital application that I want to use, because it's all verified and immutable information. Now, I know there can be multiple providers of that, but we have to come to a global consensus, if you like. And these are regulatory bodies. And I know it's a big task, but some of the bigger jurisdictions should be able to do it on what a self-sovereign digital ID is. Now, I do not mean a government ID. I'm talking about a self-sovereign digital ID that I own. It's verified, it's immutable. We can convert that to an NFT, and we can use that as a trigger, if you like. That also protects us against privacy, because we actually don't have to give them our ID. We only have to give them the outcome of our ID. The tick. Yes, I am Professor Lisa Gay Short. Here is my NFT. The only person who can use my NFT is me, and I can use that to access anything. So it's a one single key, if you like, front door key, because most of the challenges that we have in the entry point is getting in. It's getting in. I'll give you an example. My 87-year-old dad that I spoke about, he doesn't understand how to do facial recognition, upload documents and all that sort of stuff. So when I was in Australia, I helped him set up his Coinbase and Wirex account and Binance account and so forth. And I fundamentally made a mistake because when I moved back to the UK, I got a UK phone number. I updated my Authy for my two-factor identification. And then I realised I went to log into Dad's account and help him with something on TeamViewer, couldn't get in. And then I went, oh no, I know what I've just done, because I couldn't authenticate his Authy entry for his Coinbase account. And so at the moment, I can't get into his accounts because I've got to try and get on FaceTime and try and talk my 87-year-old dad through how to do facial recognition and upload documents from the other side of the world. Now, that is insane. And you might think, yeah, well, that's an 87-year-old, but you know what? There is a very large percentage of the world fits into that category who don't even understand 2FA. So how will they ever get into this world without a self-sovereign digital ID? So to your point, David, a lot more work needs to be done. We've also got two big areas, the very young and the very old, who are not even being addressed. They're just ignored in terms of how do we support them to access these technologies. So a single self-sovereign ID, or even that thinking where we are using the technology itself to get in, not using these hybrid archaic systems to do KYC and our AML obligations.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Hey, well, we've got that's a very good point, and I think if we ever get serious about the metaverse and that being an interoperable metaverse, then self-sovereign ID's got to be key to that, right? So hear what you're saying there, Lisa. We've got anyhow 5 minutes left on this wonderful discussion. Maybe you'd like to just sum up your perspectives, having had this discussion, starting with you, David. What's your takeaway, or what should the listener viewers takeaway be on the subject of usability, accessibility in crypto?
Yeah, nice. Yeah, no, I just think just to highlight again the fact that front end and UI are areas in cryptocurrency which I think lots of companies would love to hear from talented UI designers and things on how they can improve services. So yeah, maybe if you're a designer or a UI guy and you're new to crypto, then it's definitely an avenue which I would recommend following, because it's really fun. The thing that I like about crypto is the people, the communities are just so much fun. For me, it was a hobby that turned career. And yeah, I've been really happy ever since. It's amazing. So yeah, basically anyone that's got an interest or has got ideas as to how you could help onboard it, then yeah, I definitely recommend pursuing that, because it's a great place to be. It's a really cool people, and yeah. Really
Thank
good.
You.
Yeah, for me, probably two things. I certainly drive more women into the industry through education and drive more women there. But I think two areas. We need to start educating our decision makers and our leaders, because they're actually now starting to set the frameworks and decisions that on a fundamentally flawed foundation. So that level of education needs to change. So, there needs to be, and, we've been working hard, colleagues like myself and Dean Armstrong and lots of other, Dennis Guardia and various other people, trying to engage the decision makers in some factual information, and the factual information needs to come from industry experts, not from the CEOs of the existing traditional banks. They're asking the wrong individuals, so that's critical to this. And I would say the second thing is to include the SMEs, the small to medium enterprises, on how they can leverage this technology to benefit themselves. And I always like to tell people this, that keep in mind that 95% of the economy are small to medium enterprises. 90% of the world is employed in small to medium enterprises, and they're being excluded in these conversations. So we do need to work on that area, how they can leverage smart legal contracts, digital assets, digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, what it means for them, products specifically designed, bank accounts and crypto wallets that are specifically designed for SMEs. I mean, I had a conversation with somebody the other day and said, look, I want to set up a corporate account for a client of mine. They said, is he going to do 100,000 trade transaction a month? I went, no, he's a small business. He might do 5 to 10. or he might want to put all his payments through there. There's no products out there that are being designed for SMEs. And this is profound. If we increase the education of just SMEs about the deployment and use of blockchain technologies and the use of cryptocurrencies, we would overnight add $1.97 trillion to the economy.
Right. Well, that's
about accessibility. And I want you to think that also, if 90% of the world is employed by those SMEs, then 90% of those working and engaged would also get for the first time access and usability and see what it means to be able to use these applications and use cryptocurrencies and how simple they are. So, you know, I literally sometimes take people on a journey of going shopping with me, and I get to the supermarket checkout at Aldi and they say it's £120, and I stand there and I convert my Bitcoin or Ethereum. I choose which one I'm going to use. I simply go add funds plus which currency do you want to add funds from? Oh, I'll go Bitcoin today, and it drops it into my Visa card and I tap my machine. That process alone is gobsmacking for people who don't understand accessibility.
Right. That sounds great. Thank you for taking us to that point, because we're just about out of time. I'm just going to say thanks again to David and Lisa and just pause our recording.